Hey, Mike, I'm so excited to have you back on 286 Sunshine. You're going to be hosting a series of shows. You've got some candidates that you want to talk about. It is election time, and it is time for everybody to know where your candidates stand.
Thank you, Sabrina Watson and 286 Sunshine. This is Mike Cartwright, your host, and we're broadcasting here live, Tampa, Hillsborough County, Florida. And yes, we have 11 supervisor of election candidates from the free state of Florida, and we're going to be introducing each and every one of them to you separately in a show that I'll be hosting and going county by county. We have another guest today, one of the now 13 county supervisor of election candidates here in the state of Florida. And again, this show is hosted by Sabrina Watson and 286 Sunshine. Thank you. And we want to show you our map. Supervisor of elections in the primary, which is August 20th. So get out the vote is important as we're coming to the deadline. Here we see a map of 13 of the counties. Very special guest today, another one of our Patriot Supervisor of Election candidates who has a very important election, which will be in the August 20th primary. We have 13 different counties here in the state of Florida that we have identified where they have Supervisor of Election candidates challenging the incumbent. Many of them have a very important race that's coming up quick again in that August 20th primary. Today, our special guest from Charlotte County is Mr. David Kalin. Hello, David. How are you today?
Fantastic. Thank you for having me on today. It's always great to be able to get some word out there and bring some attention to what's really going on here in Florida.
Well, thank you. God bless you and America for stepping up and helping to bring back election integrity. You know, a lot of people still feel that that there's a problem with our election officials, and apparently you candidates are doing something about it. We want to share today some of the important things unique to Charlotte County, but then also some of the things that are shared throughout the state of Florida, and as I understand, throughout the United States of America, as far as the problems with our election integrity. And I'm going to try and help you by facilitating that. And I want you to try and explain it to me like I was 18 years old and I'm a first-time voter. So I'm going to apologize now. I'm going to ask some questions. When you guys use some of those big terms, I'm going to ask you to explain it to me like I was a first-time voter. So, hey, David, if you've got something that you want to talk about first and some images you want to share, we're here. Let's go. We're all ears.
I do have some images we can throw up then. I want to first start by saying pretty much everything that you've believed in election systems and the sanctity and security of it, throw that concept out the window. It is what we've been told, not what the facts are. And when you get a bunch of technical people like myself, Chris Gleason, and many others, who have the ability to really drill down and dig into the systems and understand what's going on behind the scenes where nobody gets to normally see, that's when you start to realize what's happening. And that is where most of our group has come into this, to really start looking at what is happening. And it is so multifaceted. It's not just in the electronic side of it. It's not just voting machines. It's not just our EVID systems, the signature verification, but it gets into our records keeping. It gets into the mindset of what's been going on within the state and how they handle records, how they handle their actual elections, who's following the law or not following the law. And what we've got here in Charlotte County is no exception. We've got numerous issues that are happening here. I'd like to tell you a story about a few of those today. My background, I've been programming since I was 6 years old. I've got a lot of folks going, you can't do that. Well, most of them were trying to figure out which hole to put that little square peg in on that ball when they were a little kid. I was busy programming. I grew up as an IBM kid. I've been very fortunate to be in the electronics field pretty much my entire adult life. Worked for Department of Defense contractor, designing and building guidance computers for rockets, spacecraft, submarines, as well as communication systems. I've worked in bank security, IT, access control. I've handled infrastructure for networking for power plants, nuclear power plants, schools, military installations, you name it, I've done it. Most recently, I just retired from the airline about a year ago. I was part of cabin crew, but I did work directly with the FAA and the airline in compliance. I was an elected official out of the state of Pennsylvania, where I served as a state commissioner. So I'm very familiar with interfacing with your people, your local government, and the state, something I've done before. So I've got experience in pretty much all these fields that we need. I was asked to run for this position by a number of individuals and organizations. I have been an announced candidate since September of 22. After I ran for commissioner here in Charlotte County in the primary of 22, where there were just too many anomalies to ignore. So got some stuff I can bring up here. I'd like to show you what's going on. So these are some of our primary ballot boxes. As you may see, they're both from the same precinct. Our courthouse primary of 2022, as you can see on the box. These, when this photo was taken at the end of 2022, this was taken December 12th of 2022 by a poll worker that happened to be at the location. You notice the seals are cut, no ballots. I've asked to where those ballots are. They can't tell me what happened to them. They're not in storage. They're nowhere to be found. Now they're past their destruction date. I can't get a hold of them. That should alarm people that just months after an election, and the reason I talk about this is some of the anomalies that were occurred here in 2022 during our primary. We had a race where you had 3 Republicans running against each other. That's an open primary. No challenger on the Democrat side, no write-ins. You are required to reach 50% plus 1 vote to be declared the winner. Otherwise, you run off in November with the 2 highest vote totals. That did not happen. The incumbent reached 40, I believe it was 43%. They awarded him the race. That is a selection. That is not an election. That is why I believe so many of these ballots have gone missing, and the records for them are gone, and our former SOE has resigned. The governor then appointed someone to the office, but in the midterm, when they were running with no authority, they were wheeling boxes of
What was
ballots.
the approximate, what year and approximate month was that, please? That the
He left December 6th, 2022.
So let me
He
get this
resigned. His
straight.
name was Paul Stamolis.
So
And on December
but
9th,
hold on a second. Let me see if I got this straight. There was an elected supervisor of election, and then on December 6th, 2022, the governor replaced him and appointed the now sitting incumbent that you're running against. So this person that you're running against is also running for their first election.
yes and no. So there was about a month and a half lag between the resignation of our former and the appointment of the new. But yes, this will be my opponent's first election. It is her first time actually sitting in an office. She has run numerous campaigns for people like Thomas Rooney, Michael Grant, Rick Scott. She sat on DeSantis's campaign as an aide. So she's been around the election systems, but
what
never.
kind of experience does this incumbent that you're running against have prior to their appointment working for the supervisor of elections?
None.
Well, this is interesting, Dave. Please tell us more.
So what you have is in 2022 during this primary, the reason why so much has gone kind of awry, there were 2 commissioner races. I was running against an incumbent with another challenger. And in District 4, there was another incumbent running against 2 challengers. In that District 4 race, not my race, the incumbent did not reach 50% plus 1 vote. Since you have 3 Republicans running in the same race, no Democrat challenger, and no write-in candidate, it is now a universal primary, which many people understand it as an open primary. Democrats can vote, independents, libertarians, it doesn't matter, everybody gets to vote. That is why it's important that they have to have the 50% plus 1 vote to be declared the winner. That did not happen in District 4 race in the primary of 2022. What ended up happening, though, is the incumbent had, I believe, 43%. Now, those records have been wiped from their website as if not to exist anymore. And he
Wait
was
a minute,
anointed as the winner.
you can't destroy public records, can you?
Well, there's laws that say you can't, but what I'm going to show you here in a few moments tells you they do it with impunity. They do it on a regular basis. And that is one of the inherent problems we're finding with some of these supervisors of elections, that they are not keeping records, or they're destroying records improperly, or they're not following state statute on records retention and destruction, which is a whole nother issue, because you can create an issue where you have data breaches where your information ends up out to the public on the dark web.
Well, then when you think it's appropriate and you have particularly a statute number, we have a couple images we want to show of maybe these applicable statutes, but I'm going to let you keep going on that point. But how do you have accountability and transparency if they're destroying these records? And particularly, you're saying that the prior supervisor of election resigned, and then there was I guess about approximately 2 months before someone was appointed?
Yes, sir. So that is what happened. So you had a ship without a wheel, nobody controlling it. So what happened in that time period was, as you see this photo on the screen, ballot boxes that are supposed to hold the records for that 2022 primary for 18 months, the seals are cut, they're empty. Well, I'll show you my next slide. This, keep in mind, our former supervisor of elections resigned on December 6th of 2022. This photo was taken by a citizen watching the elections office workers with no supervisor of election wheel out on December 9th, 2022, box after box after box of records, which you can see right there in that photo. They came out the back door of the elections office and ended up in personal vehicles. Some records ended up in dumpsters. And that is not how records are to be handled and destroyed. There's actually a procedure. The state actually has a full-out best management practice as to the type of shredding, if you're going to shred it, the companies that can actually just do the document destruction, but it gets into more than that.
Well, wait a minute. I want to make sure we don't miss some of these important talking points for the first-time voter. Remember, I told you I'm the first-time voter. My vote record was put in a dumpster. That doesn't sound like a proper standard operating procedure for the destruction of what should be something very well safeguarded as far as our records. You said they were put in dumpsters?
Yes. So the state's very clear that if you have ballots or anything pertaining to an election, a specific election, is required to be kept for 22 months, short of a court order keeping it longer. This election had just happened in August, and all the records are now gone in December. That makes you question a little bit of what's going on. I've come under a little bit of heat for this because they say I don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm sitting here with the documentation. I'm sitting here with the photos. As you've said, a photo is worth 1,000 words.
So between August and December, 4 months later, these records were destroyed when, in fact, the state law says they're supposed to be retained for 22 months. Is that what you're telling me?
Absolutely. But it doesn't stop there.
Sounds criminal to me.
Doesn't stop there. So we had Hurricane Ian in 2022 during our general election. So there was a little bit of chaos here in Charlotte County as being ground zero. And what we ended up with was a little bit of chaos. Some of our polling locations were closed or moved to other locations. Well, we had a poll worker driving our election van. And this was during the November primary, just prior to the election. And he hits the brakes and out comes this bag from under the election van seat. You see that in the next slide here. Now, if you look at those are thumb drives that belong to election machines. You know, the DS200s from ES&S that actually hold all your votes. And there's a receipt laying right there on the seat that went with it that's post-dated for election day. Now, this may be nothing, but my question is, where is the security protocols being used to manage the thumb drives that are supposed to be kept under lock and key and secure management so nobody can preload or skew votes onto these thumb drives just floating around in an elections van where there's at least a dozen people that drive that van? That raises serious concerns on the validity of the counting of our votes, as well as what has happened with these thumb drives. What is their security procedures and protocols? Why are they not being followed in this case? So these have never been in my possession. The state's very confused on that when they opened an investigation into this. I was just sent the photo from the poll worker that this incident happened with. I will tell you that poll worker did go to the Secretary of State's office. Nothing came of it. It wasn't until I did another podcast that some attention was brought to this. So we've got some serious issues, but it doesn't stop there. So on January 6th, I get a phone call at about 11 o'clock at night from a group of citizens that tell me, we were at the public dumpster next to the SOE's office, which is shared by about 4 different restaurants. And they said, we got a bunch of computers and a bunch of shredding. So you can see the shredding there, which after a long, extensive investigation by the state and some meddling with an attorney, the state claims these are Post-it notes. We've actually been able to reassemble some of these documents. They are everything from ballots to voter registrations, voter IDs, voter secrecy sleeves. So many of them are mail-in ballot envelopes. These went to what was my personal attorney for safekeeping.
Let me ask you, those items that you just described, would they have private confidential information such as my address, my social security number, anything? Would there be personal information in those documents that you said were found in a trash can?
You would have an address and a signature, and that's what we found on them. You're not going to have a social security number on these documents. However, an address on the voter IDs and the registrations with a signature. So that's the first part of the problem. The bigger issue came down to the hard drives that were found in these computers. Now, keep in mind, some of the hard drives were damaged, but there was a computer tossed in there, and the poor young lady that handled that computer was in charge of new voter registration. That's the hard drive that came out of that computer. This can all be verified through the state. It can be verified through records to the serial number to the machine, because I'm still in possession of the actual computer tower. The state investigators, they were not interested in the actual computer. They were interested in this hard drive. Well, when they received this hard drive, supposedly from my attorney, it was smashed. They said it was unusable. That image right there is not smashed, and it is not unusable. I've been in this industry for a very long time, and when that computer was plugged in, it booted. I did not plug a monitor into it, but it booted. It went through its seek cycle. It went through its full boot cycle, all the way to its prompt, which insists that it's got an operating system on it. Everything was there. Short of being called a criminal for accessing the data, I then pulled that hard drive. It went into a static bag as per protocol as a technician here, and it went to my attorney's vault. Now, some of the problems we've encountered here through this entire investigation, my personal attorney was also working for my current opponent and is actually now helping fund her campaign and support her campaign. So when this got turned over to the state and the shredded documents were declared Post-it notes and this hard drive was declared smashed and unusable, does that sound like a cover-up? Because I think it is.
Pretty overwhelming, David.
This is not the only problem we're having here in our systems. When you start to look at what's going on behind the scenes, everybody talks about us being the gold standard. Imagine everybody's looking at Florida. Even the Trump campaign has now declared us a tier 2 state. We're not a battleground state, so there's no need to dump all the resources into our state for his reelection. He believes he has this sewn up. That's not the case. And I think they're going to be sadly mistaken when they find out what's going on behind the scenes with our election systems and the number of illegals that have been allowed to sign up to vote in the state of Florida. Many folks are not aware that here in the state of Florida, being an illegal alien doesn't preclude you from voting. It's just illegal. So there's a state statute that says if you're an illegal alien or a non-citizen, you cannot vote. There's a law that says if you do vote, there's a penalty. But there's absolutely no law forcing our supervisors of elections to verify your citizenship status. So if you've got a state ID and you check the box that says you're a citizen, it's sent to VR systems to be updated into the voter rolls, because yes, we have a third-party company that manages pretty much every aspect of our elections in Florida. It is not managed by the Secretary of State, and it is not managed by our supervisors of elections. They can then go out and vote because there is no verification. Many of you may be aware there was a bill put before the House and Senate this previous session to bring E-Verify to our voter rolls. That way we could ensure only valid, legal U.S. citizens were voting in Florida elections. It's part of the U.S. Constitution. It's also part of the Florida Constitution. But it never made it out of committee for a vote. This is where you start to question things and what's going on, because your election systems are all decided by a third-party company called Florida Supervisors of Election Incorporated. They are paid for by your tax dollars, but they run their own little meetings. They have a consulting firm with a lawyer on staff. It's called Rumba Consulting. Dave Ramba is the principal. They basically decide what laws they want passed, what laws they don't want passed, what their agenda is or isn't. And then those folks go to Tallahassee and lobby for whatever bills they want, and they did not want E-Verify put on our voter rolls. Now, I questioned my supervisor of elections about this, my opponent. Why aren't we just using E-Verify? Oh, we don't have that. We're not going to use that. We can't. We're not allowed to. Just to let everybody know, our supervisor of elections are employers, and under Florida statute are required to E-Verify every employee. We already have access to the system. We're also tasked with having clean voter rolls. There is nothing stopping our supervisor of elections from voluntarily running E-Verify on our voter rolls and cleaning them up to ensure only legal votes are cast. So we've got a long way to go here in the state of Florida, and we've got to get rid of these third-party organizations that are determining our elections processes. We've got to take this back to the people. There's a reason you elect a supervisor of election, and they answer to the Secretary of State's office and the Election Commission so that they can determine, based on what's happening, what valid laws need put in place. Not a third-party organization who, by the way, is well-funded by numerous outside entities. Don't know how much further you want to go down that one or not.
Well, I'm taken aback. At least I didn't hear that the supervisor of election has illegal aliens working for them, because we hope that they're using the E-Verify. But I guess I'm going to go back to that point. You mean there is not a law requiring the supervisor of election to E-Verify each and every voter, but they could do it?
Absolutely. There is no law requiring any supervisor of election in the state of Florida to verify citizenship. None. Once you check that box, if you've got a valid Florida ID, the moment you check that box, that's the end of the questions. You're voting. If you get caught, there is a penalty. Please keep that in mind. However, when have criminals followed the law?
And I'm following that, and I heard driver's license, and I know that the same thing goes for an identification card, which not require you to be able to drive. So People can get, an illegal alien can get a Florida identification card. Do you have any idea what kind of proof you have to have of who you actually are to receive an ID or driver's license card? Do I have to bring in my birth certificate and say 2 other forms of United States or state of Florida identification? What is it required to get a driver's license or ID?
Oftentimes, all it requires is a couple of pieces of mail sent to your address in your name. That could be the Columbia Record Club. It could be a bill from a credit card. It could be a water bill. It could be anything. You take that in, and now that's considered valid ID to get a state issued ID. We've got a number of problems that are just well beyond this problem, and our lawmakers aren't addressing it. I want to get into something quick with you on that, because we talk about your driver's license. So this past year, we had a problem with voters who showed up to vote in primaries, and they were told, you're not that party affiliation. You're an NPA. And these folks were lifelong Republicans. So all we had here in the state of Florida was a presidential primary, preference primary, which was for the Republican Party. And those folks came out en masse to vote for their candidates. And they're being told that, no, you're an NPA. Only to find out that they had changed their address on their driver's license or renewed their driver's license, which sent me down a rabbit hole to find out there's updates that were done to our motor voter registration system. And one of the failures of it was to carry over your party affiliation to your new ID. So people were showing up as an NPA. Now, shall give a shout out to most of our clerks at the DMVs. They caught it. They carried over the party affiliation. Now, my opponent told me I was a conspiracy theorist for this. Yet, we've got CS HB 135 being introduced in November to pass the state legislature, which is a direct fix for the motor voter registration issue. It'll be enacted on January 1st. So when I've got somebody telling me that I'm a conspiracy theorist, yet the conspiracy is not a conspiracy, I've got to question where that person is getting their information from. And are they keeping their ear to the ground? Are they paying attention to what the voters are saying? And if not, how are they going to head off problems like this when you have voting issues, when you have machine issues, you have a precinct where an NPA isn't getting to vote for anybody in an open primary? These are issues that an opponent needs to be very, very aware of, and she is not.
So as we go through some of these talking points between you and I, maybe we could share some other different images. I wanted to work my way into the conversation and not interrupt you, but you were talking about illegal immigrants. I wanted to have my PowerPoint up there that showed the bus with the 71% of illegal immigrants that are being sent to red district areas. So I'm going to bring this up. Save America from Illegal Immigration ties in with what we're doing here as far as election integrity, as we understand that a majority of illegal immigrants are being sent to the state of Florida, and particularly with the objective of trying to turn red Republican congressional and voting districts purple and blue. This is the Still to Vote 2024. It's not in the machine. It's right there beneath our very nose. There's an invasion there at the border. Can you see that image that I'm talking about? This
absolutely, absolutely, and that is one of the big problems we are having.
Tell us more about the Still to Vote with the illegal immigration. Would you expound more on that? You were saying that illegals can attain identification and show up to vote, and then they can falsify to attest that they're able to vote when actually not. And our supervisor of election is apparently not doing a good enough job screening and stopping illegals for voting. Would you explain that more to us?
So what we have seen over the past 3.5 years, the migrants pouring across our border, That's against the law. We have immigration laws. We are a nation based on immigrants, and we have probably some of the best immigration laws out there. However, for the last 3.5 years, that has been thrown to the wind, and you have seen millions a year come across that border. We don't know where they're all from. They're coming in here. They're being dispersed all over the nation. Even our governor paid to fly some of the folks from the southern border up to New York and other locations. The number of people being dispersed all over this country, as well as into the state of Florida, and they're really focusing on red states, is when you bring these folks in, you create a voting block. Who do you think they're going to vote for? The people giving them a handout or a hand up? They're voting for the handout. You've got a party that is bent on giving away the United States of America. You come into this country illegally now, and we reward you. We give you money. We give you a phone. We pay for housing. There's an incentive to come here.
And I would like to explain, make sure that you know, and hopefully you'll use this when you find appropriate. Our website, SaveAmericaFromIllegalImmigration.com, is identifying the sanctuary areas depicted by the blue counties where our sheriffs and the Board of County Commissioners are intentionally and or unintentionally creating sanctuaries for illegal immigrants because they're not enforcing the ICE 287G program, which is to stop the revolving door policy of the catch and release of arrested criminal illegal aliens back into our community. And what's happening is that many of these illegal aliens are finding ways and being encouraged to vote so that they can create a more of an environment conducive. So they're taking our conservative and constitutional areas and turning them into socialist populations. Some people liken it to the 15-minute or the smart cities. We're basically calling it what it is, sanctuaries for illegal aliens, and we're trying to do something about it. You can see the metropolitan areas of Tampa Bay, Miami, and then up there towards Tallahassee. I don't know if you've seen this map before, or you might have anything to share. I'm looking at your county there, Charlotte. Apparently, your sheriff is utilizing the 287G program. Are you familiar with this?
Yes. What you have, though, is half our county is a farming community. The other half is a retirement community. So pretty much all of Eastern Charlotte County is a farming community with a phenomenal amount of migrant workers pouring in. And I understand a lot of farms. I'm a farmer myself now. And a lot of farmers will hire illegal immigrants because it's cheap labor. And in the economy we're dealing with right now, having that cheap labor keeps them afloat. Otherwise, they could not afford it. And by virtue, they're allowing these folks in to do this work. And the unintentional consequence for the farmers is now you're creating a voting block. The intentional problem is from our lawmakers. When you think about something as simple as E-Verify on our voter rolls, that they had that bill and they chose not to take it out of committee, they chose not to vote on it. They left us open and vulnerable in our November election to have illegals voting in our state. And everybody sits here and thinks that, oh, all these counties are red, they're strong red. You wait until you have that influx of voters coming in that, while they might not be registered as a Democrat, they might be registering as a Republican to skew the vote. We see that happen so often. We see leaders in our county especially. You cannot get elected with a D behind your name, but you can switch your party affiliation and put an R behind your name, and in the next election cycle, you've been a lifelong Republican and you're getting elected. We see that all too often throughout the state. I hear the stories every day with everybody I'm talking to. And we have slowly moved our state over the last decade to the left. And we're holding on to a conservative state by a thread. It is not these massive numbers they believe. And they know this, and that is why they're bussing in these illegals. Well, because now they know they can tip the scale with a handful of votes.
I got that. So, but you mentioned about how employers are supposed to validate through E-Verify that the person that they're employing is a legal immigrant and not illegal, that they do have a right to be here. As I understand, that if you have 25 or more employees, that you're supposed to do it or it's against the law. Well, if you have any idea what happens when you report this to your local sheriff? Do they come out and investigate that?
No, not locally here. It's not that I want to talk bad about my sheriff, but I will tell you my sheriff's a bit lackadaisical. We've got drugs running rampant. We've got, you look at human trafficking from Tampa to Collier. We are number 3 in the nation for human trafficking because of the lack of borders on the West Coast here. It's so easy to get in and out. Plus, we have a plethora of small airports that do not have customs. So you can get an individual off a boat to a private dock, onto an aircraft, and anywhere into this country you want them to go.
Yeah,
And
so you
many
and
of our
I,
sheriffs,
excuse me, you and I were using the term illegal immigration, and so often, making sure you use the right terminology, because this goes right into human trafficking. It's actually
absolutely.
Human trafficking, which also has to do with sex trafficking. Well, wait a minute. I didn't mean to digress and go into particularly other officials. Let's just keep it to the elections. When you report this to the Office of Election Crimes and Security, the newly founded office from our governor that is underneath the sanction of FDLE, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, when you report to the Office of Election Crimes and Security some of these violations of voting and election laws and some of the crimes, what actions are they taking? How many arrests, how many cases, how many charges, how many trials have there been on some of these election crimes that you've been describing? What's going on with our law enforcement and our judicial system when it comes to election crimes?
So that's a whole nother topic, but it's very easy to glean right into that. So the problem you have is our governor likes to appoint people, and they usually appoint friends or friends of friends. Well, that's the Peter Paul principle. If you don't have somebody qualified for that position, I don't care that they knew so-and-so or that so-and-so recommended them. They don't have the qualifications to do the job. And I will tell you firsthand, me dealing when I reported these documents that were in the dumpster, these hard drives, the lead investigator handling the case couldn't even keep accurate notes. So when I had my deposition, I actually recorded my deposition. And yet everything I said was factual, concise, and clear. Yet when I get the final report from the investigation on this whole thing, it was so convoluted. It was geared to make an elected official protected, and anybody that reported it looked crazy. So think about this. What election crimes have they prosecuted? The bulk of the election crimes they've gone after have been the felons who thought that they had their voting rights restored. They went to the clerk of courts, they got the paperwork, they went to the supervisor of elections, they filed the necessary paperwork to restore their voter rights, but they weren't quite there yet. And so they get arrested, and now they're going back to jail with yet another felony on them. And those are the crimes that are getting prosecuted.
Well, how many of the supervisors of election that encouraged those convicted felons who were mistakenly misled to think that their voting rights have been restored? I saw that this newly formed Office of Election Crimes and Security arrested, I believe it was 44 felons right out of the gate. It was like, look at us, our new office has made all these arrests, we made all cases. How many supervisors of elections who let that happen were charged, investigated, convicted?
Zero.
Zeros.
You've got to protect these folks. That's what the state's doing. It's protecting itself. So when you have the fox watching the hen house, do you think the fox is going to punish itself for stealing a few hens?
Well, that doesn't sound like what sovereign and implied immunity is really supposed to be about. If you actually have criminal intent and it is to defraud, we the people, that's why we want accountability and transparency. If a supervisor of election knowingly lets a convicted felon vote who has not had his rights restored, that sounds criminal to me.
Absolutely. And according to state statute is, but how much hoopla do you think that would create in the media if they prosecuted a supervisor of election for that? You cannot have that kind of media. And when you realize what the bulk of the media it is out there, it is complicit with our systems. It is complicit with our state officials. It is to run a narrative, a specific narrative, that we're your leaders, we're doing your job.
We're here with David Kalin, and he's going to tell us some more about his upcoming election in the August 20th primary.
All right. Well, we look at this, we have so many topics that are issues here in our systems, our election systems. It's between the machines, the ballots, the security, but the other big issue is illegals voting in our elections. And that needs to be paramount in the forefront of everybody out there. Why our lawmakers aren't making this priority number one right here, right now, before the November election should tell you something about our current elected officials. Why is that not number one for them here in the state of Florida with the number of illegals we know are coming in here on a daily basis? So that is going to be my top priority, is to ensure we don't have illegals voting, at least here in Charlotte County. But again, I'm going to lobby Tallahassee to ensure that we do not have illegals voting in the state of Florida. And I'll tell you, the Republican Party's been a little bit complicit here lately with me, at least in Charlotte County, trying to fight every grassroots candidate. And just the other night, we held a vote in our local Republican Party, the REC, Charlotte County. My opponent was lucky. She got 2 whole votes. I was fortunate enough to walk away with 40.
Wait a minute. Did I hear that correctly? In your rec, you had a straw poll versus the sitting incumbent, and in your rec, the vote was 20-2 in your favor.
40 to 2.
40 to 2.
Yes. So that should tell you something about where people see who has the technical expertise as well as the management skills and the ability to straighten out the problems that are currently going on with our SOE's office, as well as throughout the state with SOEs.
And I want to make sure I got that point about your incumbent again, because I don't think that I got that correct, or maybe the audience might not have heard. Before the appointment by the governor of the sitting incumbent who you're running against in this August 20th, how long had they worked for any supervisor of election office?
None. 0. They ran campaigns for people, but never, ever worked in a supervisor of elections office or a supervisor of elections role. Has she never worked in any kind of technical background, security background? It has always been a little bit of people management for campaigns. PR person, not somebody who has technical background. And I will tell you, with that, you need somebody that also can recognize talent and people with the skill set to put them in these positions within those offices to be effective and accurate. So you need to surround yourself with professionals that know what they're doing. And that's not happening right now. I can't get a records request answered in months. It takes me months to get a records request answered. I will tell you, I did a debate with her at the Republican Club of Charlotte County. And I had to go to the extent of threatening lawsuit to get public records. That should be that simple to get. Her response was, I can either give him his records or I can get you all your ballots. I can't do both. If my supervisor of elections can't perform the day-to-day functions like providing records, taking care of voter registrations, taking care of equipment maintenance, and perform an election, get out of the office and let somebody who knows what they're doing do it.
Sure. So you've done FOIA, FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. You've done those requests, and there's some of them that haven't been finished and completed yet. And there's some of them, do I understand, that have been redacted? How do you have accountability and transparency for we the people if you can't get these public records requests done?
Absolutely. And I'm working with a team of other people that have been asking for records. We've been asking for her bond. Where's her bond? She doesn't have a bond. You are required as an elected official to have a bond, but it's been stalemate, stalemate, stalemate. And unfortunately, that's not what you're going to get with me. We're supposed to be an open book. You've got records. We work for the people. As a supervisor of elections or any other elected official, you work for the people. You answer to them. And when they ask you for a record, you ask them, how would you like that formatted? Electronic, in paper, via mail, email? You work for the people. And that's what is imperative here to understand.
Well,
She
then,
doesn't do that. I do that.
so the people of Charlotte County and your supporters, what's the name of your website? And where can they find out more information about supporting you? And again, would you repeat, when is your election? What is the date for your election?
My election is going to be August 20th. This month. It is imperative for people to get out there. You can go out and find out more about myself. It is going to be davidekalin.com. Very simple. myname.com, David E. Kalin.
David E. Kalin, Kalin.
Yes, sir. Very simple. You can get out there, but we've also got a Facebook page. You go out, search Facebook for David E. Kalin or David Kalin or David E. Kalin for Supervisor of Elections. It's going to bring up that Facebook page. You can get involved. Start spreading that word. Go out to Twitter. It's David Kalin, Election Truth 2024. Get involved. If you are out there and you're not in my county, get involved with some of your other supervisor of elections or your grassroots America First candidates. Help them get their word out. Help them get their signs out. Retweet, repost, get that information out there. Educate your neighbors. We're out canvassing. We've done over 60,000 homes now in our county. And I will tell you, the number of people that didn't realize, despite all the signs everywhere, that there was actually an election this month. And that's the election that determines your local leadership. Because just like most of the counties in the state of Florida, your primary in August determines who your local leaders are. They have the biggest impact in your daily life, whether it be taxes, whether it be who's getting elected to office, or what's going on with your codes, who's going to dictate what you can or can't do on your property. So August 20th, state of Florida, August 20th, get out there, vote in mass. Get out there and vote.
Well, you heard it. That's David Kalin for Charlotte County Supervisor election and the August 20th primary. He is another one of our Patriot candidates, and we will be featuring more coming to you from Save America with election integrity. Thank you for joining us and have a blessed day. God bless America.
Amen. Thank you for the opportunity, and God bless America.